What do you do when the quiet of a small town is more deafening than the bustling city you left behind? When your mother moves in with you and starts to see ghosts in the grocery store. When you aren't sure you want to marry the man you met online. If you're Phyllis Theroux, you begin by sitting down with a cup of coffee and your trusty journal.
In the beginning, I kept it more or less as a survival guide from one day to the next. I was about 38. I was going through a really tough divorce. I had 3 little children. I just needed it in order to figure out how to negotiate my life 24 hours at a time. And I still do. But more and more, it became a place not to store the darkness, but to preserve the light. And that's really what it is today for me.
Now Theroux's observations have become a book, The Journal Keeper, a collection of journal entries from 6 pivotal years in her life after she moves from Washington, D.C. to the sleepy little railroad town of Ashland, Virginia.
Living in a small town is like being in a play. I think of the people in Ashland as characters who wake up every morning in an ongoing story and position themselves on stage for another 16 hours of walking, talking, and doing. Our scripts are mostly in our heads, although underlying the action is the question, how will we make our mark upon the world today? For the most part, this is an illusion. It's the world that makes its mark upon us.
The book is deeply inspiring and marvelously well written, and that awful, awful word, relatable. Life, death, the absolute indignities of aging, the good humor required on a daily basis to age. It keeps you very, very near the sense of wondrousness of life.
The Journal Keeper would not have been published at all if the book Theroux really wanted to write about her mother had come easily.
My mother led a pretty conventional life until she was around 59 years old, and then she turned her back on it, just decided she wanted to live on her own. She didn't have an education, she didn't have any money, and she had never held a job, but she really did believe, in her words, that when you take a step toward life, life will support you. And it did.
A big change in Theroux's life occurs when her mother, who is going blind, comes to live with her.
She had a very free spirit. She had a great sense of who she was. And like a lot of 85-year-olds, she apologized for nothing.
When I tried to write about her, it was like trying to hold water in my hands. She just wouldn't sit still for it in my mind. And finally a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just put your mother aside for a bit and try editing your journals. It's something a little easier. And when I did, I realized that I had wound up painting a portrait of my mother in the margins. She never did like the limelight. I mean, the idea of 2 people that both qualify for senior citizen discounts living together, that's funny right there.
Right.
When her mother passes away, another chapter begins for Theroux.
And it still works.
Yeah, it does. I got a replacement.
She falls in love, though not at first sight.
Her ideal man, as she expressed in one of her earlier books, was the horn-rimmed glasses Harvard guy with reading Emerson, you know, and I wasn't exactly of that mold.
He was an only child from a small town in Kentucky, went pretty quickly on to a military school that then morphed into Annapolis, the Naval Academy, and wound up in the corporate world. I was the oldest of 6 children. I came from a fairly sophisticated city in California. I went to a philosophically saturated Catholic college, and I spent most of my life in my head.
Many journal entries later, Theroux casts her last doubt to the wind and marries Reagan Phillips.
She helps you look at life afresh, I think. Not just at her life, but perhaps at your own life. And it seems to me that's incredibly valuable.
When I look back over the 6-year period that the Journal Keeper covers, there were so many different ways in which I felt that there was kind of a hand over my own hand guiding my life across the pages. And I believe that. I think that we're all affected by a presence if we're open to it. That does help us, nudges us this way as opposed to that way, helps us to see what we're supposed to see in our life as we go along. But I had never expected to find such tangible proof of it in my journals, and I did.